Hi there, welcome to another episode of Rants, brought to you by Camille's Harem. Not just a podcast for novice writers by novice writers, but also a YouTube channel by novice writers for novice writers. Because writing is an adventure, it's more fun with friends. Star Wars and politics. A messy can of worms that has morphed into a jagged mountain dividing the fan base. There are a ton of people who scream all over the internet, politics don't belong in Star Wars! But hey, guess what? They do. The question is, are the politics executed well or not? Before I talk to you about how you writers can wisely use politics in your own stories, let's have a look at what Star Wars has done well and bad, and sometimes just not enough, within its own franchise. First, let's look at what Star Wars did well with politics. Picture this. When Darth Vader captures Princess Leia's ship at the beginning of Episode 4, she claims that the Galactic Senate will not stand for the illegal boarding of a consul ship under the protection of the Senate and the sovereign system of Alderaan, to which Vader replies,
"You are part of the Rebel Alliance and a traitor. Take her away!"
Now then, a story that isn't supposed to be about politics would have just stopped right there. But then we get this interesting piece of subterfuge.
Holding her is dangerous. Word of this gets out, it could generate sympathy for the rebellion in the Senate.
I have traced the rebel spies to her. Now she is my only link to finding their secret base.
She'll die before she'll tell you anything.
Leave that to me. Send a distress signal, and then inform the Senate that all aboard were killed.
Darth Vader stages an accident to cover up his very illegal dealings. This incredibly quick scene gives us a lot to chew on. We learn that the galaxy is ruled by a senate, but that it is also an empire, with princesses, dark lords, and so forth. So we can quickly assume that this is kinda like the Roman Empire, to a degree, but with space wizards. And what's more is we learn that there is a division in the government and that Lord Vader must use said illegal means, such as contrived accidents, to cover up the arrest of Princess Leia. You see, his acts violate a number of set laws, as far as we can gather. There is a lot that we can still also kind of pull on about the political structure, with just kind of what we know about the Roman Empire, for example. But we can also still once again tell this is a system in great tumult. Later, it is revealed by Grand Moff Tarkin that the Emperor has dissolved the Senate, giving legislative and judicial authority over to the governors. This gives us insight into the evolving political structure of the galaxy and highlights the plight of the rebellion. Where they might have at one point received political and legal backing to oppose the Emperor, the rebels are now on their own. Fear is the dominant force in the galaxy by Episode 4. This is further emphasized with brilliant additions from the movie Rogue One and the series Star Wars Rebels, where we learn more about the role of these governors and how they influence the galaxy. We also see the extent of the Empire's power and how they're able to oppress people, take over systems relatively easily, and basically justify their misdeeds. And we are also given a glimpse into the militaristic hierarchy of the Empire. Rogue One does a great job of showing the Empire's parallels to the Roman Empire. We especially see how there are two factions within the Empire's hierarchy. One is the political and militaristic side, as represented by Director Krennic, and then we have kind of the occult as represented by Darth Vader. And when you take all of that together and mesh it on up, you realize that there is a complicated and very diverse and rich political landscape to the story of Star Wars. This is, however, the best we get in terms of politics within the Star Wars franchise. Episode 1 is the biggest offender, in my opinion, when it comes to the misrepresentation and misuse of politics. Let's set up the first movie for you. The Trade Federation is angry with the revised taxation of trade routes and decides to besiege the planet of Naboo to force yet another revision. Palpatine's political intrigue to dispose of Chancellor Valorum aside, this is a stupid way to set up a story. First of all, taxes confuses most people. I mean, let's be honest with this here. And other than people griping about taxes, unless we see a revolution against tax laws, a war to establish said tax laws makes little sense and is honestly a terrible idea. And secondly, blockading a planet with no major exports or imports is financially pointless, unless Naboo is offering dirt-cheap Gungan labor, or is selling their water off to desert planets, or has a massive supply of kyber crystals, or has access to space-bending spice. There is no justifiable reason to besiege this planet. And thirdly, when we are told that the Senate takes forever to decide on anything, then how in the unholy blazes did they ever even get off the ground a ratification of taxation of trade routes? I mean, come on! It's kind of contradictory when you think about it. You see, it's not that we get too much sitting around talking about politics in the prequel trilogy, at least A New Hope gives us talking and walking, but it's that the politics themselves make very, very little sense. And then we get into the newest run of Star Wars movies. Their problem? Not enough politics! Seriously, in the wake of The Return of the Jedi, let's think of this. The galaxy is supposedly split into two major factions, the New Republic and the Empire. How did the First Order rise up in the first place to oppose both groups? Why does the Republic not fight alongside the Resistance? And for that matter, why does there even need to be a quote-unquote resistance? And after blowing up the Capitol, why didn't Snoke just swoop in and claim supreme victory and lazily rule the galaxy from his oversized Star Destroyer? And what would any of that ruling even look like anyways? We just get the wars aspect of Star Wars without the necessary political background or scaffolding to provide any sort of context or sense to all of this. There are simply no answers within the movies, which makes the writing for their stories look weak and haphazardly taped together. If nothing else, it is a shame to see the franchise do such a bad job with politics, considering how often it bandies those about. I mean, Episode 4 had just a few lines of dialogue in 2 scenes, and that was enough. It paints a great picture of the political landscape. Rebels and Rogue One also just add really well to that wonderful tapestry and build on the previously supplied canon material. Why then do the prequel and sequel trilogies just totally drop the ball in this matter? I honestly can't say, except that it just comes down to someone botched their writing. So how can we as writers learn from these mistakes and better our own use of politics in our stories? The answer is this, I believe. Less equals more when it comes to politics within your narrative. This doesn't mean leave it out completely or only have a token mention of politics. Instead, what I mean by this, that less equals more, is to keep it simple, straightforward, and tailored to your audience. I will pitch an example to you. Think of Voltron, Legendary Defender. Voltron gives us numerous moments in which the heroes and villains politic. The heroes work to create alliances through cultural understanding and mutual protection, while the villains use trade and military posturing to form their political dominance. One of the best moments in the show in regards to the theme of politics is when Lotor is telling Team Voltron how they can best topple the Galra High Command by identifying and eliminating the forerunners to the throne once Zarkon has been deposed of. Lotor explains which ones hold amazing political clout, their role in making the Empire function, and how they might be able to insert themselves into the run for the throne. It is a sweet and simple scene. It's not very long, but it does an amazing job of putting the Galra Empire into a greater political context and helps to show why it is so very important that the team supports Lotor's claim to the throne. This example from Voltron really is able to hold up the same kind of weight as other examples that we can easily glean from more exotic and large series such as Game of Thrones or Wheel of Time, where politics are used in all manner of crazy and intricate ways. But even then, these epic fantasy series only use the laws that are needed to help push the plot along. And if you want a good example of how this is done in the science fiction genre, then you have to look no further than Star Trek. Now then, this doesn't mean that you can't go hog wild with your own political landscapes in your narratives. Remember, you are tailoring the politics to the specific audience that you wish to speak to. And there are many people out there who love a good political thriller or a courtroom drama. In these stories, your knowledge of laws and how they can be interpreted are largely the driving force to the drama and the intrigue. But even then, just remember, it is not helpful to list out every subparagraph in each law that you invoke unless that said subparagraph is what you're going to use to give that nice twist to your interpretation. Otherwise, just listing out every aspect of the law just becomes tedious and boring, and you will lose your audience. And nor is it helpful to use this really obscure stuff to justify a highly improbable conflict like the Naboo blockade. Politics are a tricky subject in writing, and you can definitely expect us as the Harem to discuss it in greater detail in a future episode. In the meantime, keep working on your use of politicking. Try to find ways to simplify it within your own stories to make it very understandable and relatable to your audience. Don't go overboard unless you have to, and make sure that it makes sense within the context of your story. That's very important. The whole Battle of Naboo and everything leading up to what will be Palpatine's grand plot to become Supreme Chancellor sounds really cool and flashy. It looks really cool and flashy on screen at times, but when you take a closer look, you realize that it was just really sloppily written, and you wonder, how did no one in the Galactic Senate just say, Trade Federation, this is total BS, you're losing money? And the Trade Federation is like, oh my gosh, we are losing money. And how is this even legal? Good day, everyone. Like, seriously, it makes no sense. You, writers, can do so much better than Star Wars Episode 1. Trust me. Well, that's all for this video. If you want more in-depth discussions from us, go check out our podcast, Camille's Harem, found on Podbean, iTunes, and Google Play. We also have art that you can check out on Tumblr, writing exercises and advice on Pinterest, and discussion forums on our Reddit. I've provided links to all of those sites in the video description for your pleasure and enjoyment. And we do epic readings of terrible fanfics too. If you know a bad fanfic that we should read and tear apart, please send us a link to that terrible story via our Twitter at Camille's Harem. And until the next video, tschüss.